Welcome to Eco Community Conversations, everyone, made possible by Earth Gives. We're a 501c3 impact organization working to catalyze environmental philanthropy beyond the 2% that it sits at today. And we focus on that through community building and storytelling, and also opening up a platform called Earth Gives Day to allow you to invest in organizations like those we're talking with today. So here we are kicking off a series of chats with some amazing nonprofit, environmental and climate focused leaders. I'm Rhonda Bannard. I'm the executive director of Earth Gives, and we are ramping up our work on Earth Gives Day, inviting in nonprofits to register and eventually people like you to join in and invest in the important work that these organizations are doing. Joining me today is Loren Riemer from Big Bend Conservancy. So great to have you, Loren. Finally
Thanks
to meet
for having
you.
me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thanks. So share a little bit about who you are and where you're joining us from.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Loren Riemer. I'm the CEO and executive director of the Big Bend Conservancy. I'm based in Austin, Texas, but spend quite a bit of time out in our amazing West Texas park.
That's fantastic. And let's kick it right into some deep, good stuff. What's one piece of advice or wisdom that you have for anyone wanting to make an impact on the environment or climate change? And certainly it can be specific to the area that you work in.
Sure. I would say that no impact is too small. What you can do in your personal life has universal repercussions. So whether that's choosing to minimize your carbon footprint through carpooling or using low emissions vehicles, or even something as simple as being committed to offsetting your carbon footprint by minimizing the use of single-use plastics, everything you do has really incredible repercussions, and especially in the park where we're very focused on ensuring that we're not perpetuating waste. Seeing folks that are committed to not reusing those single-use plastics has been a really important thing to take into our daily lives. So no impact is too small, and I think that folks watch and pay attention to what you do, and so that can really have a large impact.
Fantastic. And I know we're going to get into that single-use plastic point, I think, in a little bit. So share your story. How did you come to this work?
Absolutely. So my professional background has been in development and fundraising, and really spanned the universe in higher education, fine arts work, and most recently 7 years in the children's social services industry. And while all those are incredible missions, I've always been drawn to nature and the outdoors. I was incredibly fortunate as a child to spend family vacations in national parks, camping and hiking and enjoying the outdoors, and spent a lot of time with my grandparents throughout different Texas state parks in their camper. And they really opened up a lot of opportunities for me to get to explore and have hands-on opportunities with nature. And one memory I really cling to is in the Davis Mountains, which is a park very close to Big Bend in West Texas. And several rangers really took me under their wing one spring break and allowed me to go with them on bird banding missions, where they were collecting birds and banding them to figure out migration patterns. And it really stuck in my mind as a way that there were impacts happening that I had no idea were happening. And the fact that they would take little 10-year-old me under their wing and allow me to help pull these birds from the nets and band them and release them back into the wild was such an incredible experience. And just getting to see the vastness, and you're reminded of how small you are, but how great an impact you can have outside, was incredible for me. So when the opportunity came along to use my professional skill sets to raise awareness and funds for our incredible national park here in Texas, it was really an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And I've so enjoyed working alongside our park partner at Big Bend National Park to enhance all of the opportunities there.
So that's the next question. I think some people might be confused a little bit as it relates to your Big Bend Conservancy, and then there's a national park. So tell us how your organization got started and how it interrelates to the national park system.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So the Big Bend Conservancy has been in existence for 26 years now. Most national parks have what they call a philanthropic partnership agreement. So what's really interesting, and I apologize if I get too much in the weeds here, but most national parks are funded through the federal government. And as a member of the public, most people are under the impression that their entrance fees pay a significant portion of the park's budget. But the park's budget is actually very minimally funded by entrance fees. And what's really interesting about entrance fees is that those fees can only be utilized for things that directly enhance visitor experience. So it's very limited in what the park can actually utilize those fees for. And they're great things like interpretive displays and visitor educational experiences and things like that. However, it does leave a large delta of additional things that could enhance the conservation or preservation of amazing public lands. And that's really where the Conservancy comes into play. So we hold a philanthropic partnership agreement with the National Park Service, and it allows us to close the gap for outstanding needs within the national park. For us, that's things that are related to conservation, wildlife protection, historic preservation, sustainability efforts, and then outstanding needs that arrive that are brought to our attention by the park staff and leadership team as well.
So if I'm remembering right, a group of volunteers said we needed to set something up and do something. And so historic preservation, somebody's going to go, what are you preserving for historic preservation? There are buildings, right?
There's some amazing buildings in the park, including really important historic adobe structures. And those adobe structures, as with any structure, denigrate with time and weather. We recently had a structure that was impacted by a fire, which in a desert type environment is always a possibility. So we work in conjunction with the park to ensure that those are restored and renovated appropriately. Just this year, we're working with the park to retrofit one of the state's oldest working windmills. That's an incredible historic structure. And it's on one of the kind of main visited areas in the park, which will include some really amazing educational signage talking about the history of that windmill as well.
That's fantastic. Okay. So what could be possible with more support? Say donors come in through Earth Gives Day or some other form or fashion, and they throw investment dollars into you, knowledge, they want to learn more, they want to help out. What would be possible with that?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things that we get to do as the Conservancy is every year we ask the park leadership team and staff to submit to us things that would help make their jobs run more smoothly, or living in the park be a better experience for them. The park has over 80 full-time employees. And I think what a lot of people don't know is that they actually live in residence in the park. And Big Bend National Park, it's 100 miles to the nearest real grocery store. So it truly is a commitment for the folks that choose to be there, serving the public who visit the park, providing protection, providing search and rescue efforts, providing visitor education, and even things like road maintenance and ensuring that the facilities stay clean for guests. So we really try to wrap around the park staff as much as possible. And one of the things that I think is so cool about the Conservancy's work is they can bring us ideas like, it would be amazing for us to get to have outdoor chairs in our community space, which has been so important, especially throughout COVID, to have outdoor spaces to gather as a community that's so reliant on each other. But through those granting dollars, we've also been able to provide additional equipment and supplies to our search and rescue team. And with ever increasing heat and visitation that has skyrocketed throughout COVID. We've seen 10, 15, 20% visitation rates in the past couple of years. We also see increased need for search and rescue efforts because people often arrive to the park unprepared for the heat that they will encounter when they're out on the trails. So being able to provide those much needed items for our search and rescue team, things that are outside of their federal budget, but are very needed. I love that we're able to quickly respond because we have those resources available due to our amazing donors.
Fantastic. Wow, such interesting stories. So this next question was really inspired definitely by you in chatting with you last year and talking about, the impact on the park during the pandemic. So what are your interesting insights on the work you do that the average person would never know about? This one in particular, I'm thinking about the word landfill.
That's a great question. So Big Bend National Park is one of only 2 national parks in the entire nation that has a landfill on site. And as you would imagine, the landfill has very limited space. We've been told that the landfill will likely be completely full within 5 to 7 years. So Big Bend is in a very remote location. There's not a lot of opportunities for us to take the trash other places. And visitors visit from all over the state, but also all over the nation, and they bring in their food and their trash and their supplies with them. So we've been working very hard in coordination with the park to figure out how to offset what's going into the landfill, but also how to educate our visitors on their impact while they're visiting. And we've done that in several ways. We recently did a waste stream audit that was a very interesting process where essentially our folks sorted through trash to figure out what was going into the landfill. And what we discovered was potentially up to 50% of what's going into the landfill is actually compostable, which in some ways is great news. What we also found out is people are really good at keeping their food away from wildlife, which we appreciate, but it means they're wrapping it in layers and layers of plastic. So our challenge right now is, can we get to that compostable material? And can we, in a very arid environment, figure out how to create an effective composting program that creates materials that can then be reintegrated into a very unique ecosystem as well. So we're working toward that, but we're also really trying to upgrade our recycling opportunities in the park. We've worked closely with the folks who run the lodge at the park, and they have increased their recycling 7-fold. It's been an incredible partnership. So now in every lodge room at the park, when you check into your room, you have a double-sided laminated sheet that explains exactly what goes in plastic recycling, what goes in paper recycling, what goes in glass recycling, and what you should and shouldn't throw away. So we've seen a huge increase in what folks are recycling. We've also replaced all of the recycling bins to be more easily accessible. It sounds very simple, but we've found that folks need to be able to open the bins easily. But Big Bend also has quite a population of black bears, so we don't want the bears to be able to open those easily. But we've replaced all the bins with mailbox style pull bins. And we found really great usage rates utilizing those instead of an older style bin. And then we're also being really careful to ensure that in every piece of literature that visitors receive upon arriving in the park, and then signage on the bins as well, carefully explains how to utilize those bins too. So a lot of upgraded efforts. We've also seen a lot of really great community support from surrounding communities who are willing to kind of come alongside the park and help us tackle this very large trash problem. Though I think, as I've told you before, people always tease me that Loren's always talking trash, but it's a very important issue for us to resolve.
So if you pack it in, pack it out, and let's have no postal bears, right? None that can pretend that they're a male person. So,
Exactly.
wow, it's just so amazing. So yeah, that's just like an inside look, pulling back the curtain, taking a look inside of the things that you have to deal with. So a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. So how would you describe an earth giver?
So I think an earth giver can embody many things, but one thing that I rely on a lot is the Greek proverb that says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they will never sit." And while we're a desert park that doesn't have a lot of trees, I think when you're working in the conservation and preservation space, that's exactly what you're doing. You're planting the seeds to ensure that the pristine state of nature that we get to experience right now is still available for the generations that follow. One of our big projects right now is a land acquisition project that's on the western boundary of the park that's currently being encroached on by development from the community to the western boundary of the park. And it houses very ecologically important spaces, including a confluence of two creeks and a very important fossil discovery zone as well. And once we're finished with that project, it will add about 6,000 acres to the park's boundary, which will allow for scientific research, but more importantly, it will ensure that that area is protected indefinitely. And someone recently, one of my colleagues said, you know, what we do is the forever business. And I think when you invest in conservation-minded projects, you're investing in forever. And that's what's so meaningful to me.
Perfect. So what are your favorite resources? So if it's the average individual who's listening to this and they want to learn more, maybe about your specific area, your national parks, those kinds of things, or conservation in general, what books or podcasts or films or any other kind of resource that you might suggest that they listen to?
Well, I want to recommend some very specific Big Bend resources for folks who are interested in more information about Big Bend. There was recently an amazing documentary on PBS through Nature on PBS, and it's called The Wild Frontier of Texas. And they just did an incredible job really incorporating all of the different biospheres of the park and the wildlife in the park. And I think if you want to get a taste of Big Bend, that's what you should look at. I know everyone won't be able to make it out to far West Texas to visit our beautiful park, but I would really recommend Wild Frontier of Texas by Nature on PBS. And we, of course, invite you to join our Facebook page, Friends of Big Bend National Park on Facebook, where you can get a lot of incredible information from folks both visiting the park and a lot of retired rangers as well.
That's fantastic. And are you open year round?
We are. We get the privilege of being very much a year-round park. There's not a lot of extreme cold temperature. We do, of course, experience extreme heat. So I would precaution anyone coming out to be prepared for the sun, lots of water and sun protective gear.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Loren, thanks so much for joining us. Loren Riemer for Big Bend Conservancy. Follow them on all the socials, Facebook especially. So thanks for giving us a peek into what you do and all the amazing work in our national parks, and joining us on this debut of the Eco Community Conversations. We're thrilled to get to know you and your important work. So thanks and good luck for taking care of our special lands.
Thanks so much for having me.